Sliding out of the cult-ridden subterranean tangle of the Underhive, we are the spark lost among the transistors of history, the light which holds back all that darkness, the true voice of Vox-Free Innsmouth, 665.66 UHMR Chemrat Radio.
And no matter how soothing y'all might find Gabbo's pipes, and I don't know what you might be smoking on that front, but the weather's actually quite pleasant in the Hive for once. Nice, even, perfect weather, with the side of blood-curdling screams.
I guess that kind of depends on where you're standing or how you walked here. On my way, I got caught in a little bit of a blood drizzle. The Administratum and Arbites have deemed it convenient to dabble in Underhive life once again, although this time, it's hard to blame them with all these demon dogs running amok.
Nothing a few hexagrammic rounds won't solve. Reports of hellhounds seem to be restricted to the stacked districts around the thermal core, so don't try and cut through the core, on foot at least, for you brave hivers. Stick to the shield wall districts, and you should be fine.
I did happen to see one once eating a Nutty Jay's head, so I didn't really give a shit and saved my bullets.
Who are you giving head?
That was actually well done. Well done. I can't even argue with that.
And speaking of slobbering on fresh meat, we are... It's too fucking perfect. Why did you have to
well
lose
played.
it?
Well played.
Why did
That's
you
why I
have to
said
lose
it. I was
it on the
like, I can't even. I got nothing to come back with on that one.
I didn't know that's what you were going to say next, dude.
Oh, fuck. We are here at Bob's Basement Basket, moderating the newest episode of the hit pick show Hell's Chosen. Tune in to see Zygonia's own Lavinia take on the Zerker's prime brawler Mastodon. Let's see which of these two beasts in their own industries can claim the title of Scorpion Pepper Dimakaran Wing Challenge. I don't know, man. She's taking on an Ogren. I don't know if she's going to out-eat him. That's all I'm saying.
That's a lot of mouth.
Meat.
Yes.
I am your solid beacon in the peerless depths of the shadow-consumed Underhive Goblin King, joined always by my partners in Vox-based criminality, the power-mauled juggler himself, Marky.
What it is, people.
It's ball juggler.
Did I misspell?
Power
Ball juggler. Keeping our magazines fully stocked in the most recent hexagrammatic rounds, the Baron of Gunpowder himself, Beast.
I prefer testicular taster, thank you.
You are an expert on taste when it comes to nuts. Hello, everyone.
And recently returned from his own infiltration trip deep into the cult of three arms, Kev. Kev, tell us, do the girls only have three arms, or do they have three of other things?
Well, what I can tell you is that a Dutch rudder is definitely different.
Okay. Yeah, I'll have to take the Dutch's word for it, I guess.
With three arms, it would be more of a Dutch outboard. She's got an outrigger.
All right, guys.
We call that extra hand the spinnaker.
Figured that was the slippery salmon.
So this is part one of our coverage on Genestealer Cults. While we focus very heavily on the GSC for this series, at times we are going to definitely need to dip into Tyranid lore. GSC for this flesh out and explain certain characteristics of the Genestealers based on pretty much how closely these two factions are linked. So, to kick it off and get into the meat of our episode,
on the darkly glorious day of the Genestealer Cult's uprising, its warriors are already 10 steps ahead of the enemy. Fast-moving saboteurs have shattered the supply lines of those who would oppose them. Hidden agents have assassinated key commanders, and routes of escape that have been cut off by demolition crews and industrial mining teams. The foe finds their ammunition crates empty, their fuel reserves dry, their transportation craft hijacked, and their supporting fleet holed and listed in orbit. When the cult unleashes the abhorrent alien monstrosities that act as its shock troops, the enemy is already surrounded, stranded, and ripe for slaughter, long planned.
Very nice. So as we have with the last few lore-based series where we dive deep into a faction, we are going to do an overview of the faction. Then we'll dip a little bit into the history and culture of the Genestealer cults. Then we will jump into some of the technology and how they might use it on the battlefield. Before we finally wrap it all up with some ideas on how to make your own lore that fits in with the faction as how it plays on tabletop. Like always, we'll pretty much try to shy away from as much rule-specific stuff as we can, although we will kind of stray into the general tactics, since a lot of times the tactics of an army do factor into the culture of their faction, or their culture as a faction dictates some of the tactics that you see in play.
Yeah, basically generalizing how the army should or does play.
Yeah.
The humble soul shall inherit the stars. Only he sees the glory in spurning individual power to become one of many. Let the fool and the heathen scramble in the embers of war for personal gain. We shall rise above the flames as a flock of phoenixes reborn, a host of angels recast in the image of the true rulers of this galaxy. A pantopoly of gods to whom nothing is considered beyond our reach.
So good.
That was
Perfect.
I loved it.
Magus incumbent Darahagu Trendact. That's what I'm going with. Tom,
enough.
did you have to remove because of the shrill or because of the laughs? I was like, is Tom gonna laugh at me?
Both.
No, they were both
couldn't-
dying.
couldn't-
I was just like, perfect.
I couldn't handle it. I do really bad with high-pitched voices like that. I was like, oh.
Dude, that's extremely respectable. I loved it.
No, that was 10 of 10.
Yeah.
Couldn't have done it better.
I wish I could do voices, dude.
I'm
Just
trying.
gotta
I'm gonna
practice,
try
man.
a little bit more. So our
Like, spend a whole evening with an accent one
Yeah.
time and see how it goes.
That's the problem. I don't.
dick,
Yeah, I've
you
done
gotta
that.
you gotta dick around and like voice chat.
Well, you were born with
essentially.
one.
Well, I
Yeah.
did that with, I was trying to come up with like a Cardon character.
Mm.
So I was
Oh,
trying
yeah.
to do that with how they would talk with like shark teeth.
They don't talk.
No, but when they do.
You shouldn't. though.
It's really easy to like do them though, because like every once in a while you're like, fuck.
They're not.
It's just Geralt
they're,
with
yeah, I
more
was like,
teeth.
they're not Geralt.
Geralt with more teeth.
You gotta like put shit in your mouth and try to talk around
Yeah, I
it.
say like
Fuck.
you need more tooth.
More teeth.
Fuck. I had to put a bass in my mouth for that. You guys are welcome.
No, you gotta underbite it. You gotta go fuck. Fuck. There you
Fuck.
go.
Yeah.
We are going to dive right into the Xenos worshippers. So Genestealers were first encountered on the moons of Yamagral and were assumed to be a unique species. This first encounter happened in roughly 500.M41, which would be about 200 years before Hive Fleet Bahamut invaded the galaxy.
Yeah. The first time I read that, I was like, they were first encountered on Girl.
Girl.
I like that.
Girl.
Girl.
I remember you saying that.
Yeah, I was
girl.
like, Girl.
Girl.
I like
How
that.
did I
Girl, get her
pronounce it?
jeans stolen.
Was it?
Girl, I like your bald ass head.
Girl.
Wow.
Girl, let me steal them
That's some,
jeans.
that's some raisins right there. A
Get a little
jeans.
nutsack and just play with it.
It's right
Told
on
you
the
like
chin.
balls.
A Genestealer is a bioform of the Tyranids, designed for stealth and infiltration, specifically of other intelligent species' settled worlds. Pure strain, not pure stain, that's different. Pure strain Genestealers are bipedal, six-limbed Xenos forms covered in armored exoskeletons. Their lower limbs are reverse-jointed or digigrade, ending in three-toed clawed feet that sprout a fourth dewclaw or talon. These allow them to move at lightning speeds and leap great distances. They're very, very good at closing with their enemy as quickly as possible. Their upper set of forelimbs are split into their upper sets of forelimbs are split into two distinct functions. The foremost end in razor-sharp arrangements of 3 claws, although in some cases these can fuse into one razor-sharp blade-like claw or even turn into lashing tentacles. Their lower set of forelimbs ends in gnarled hands, allowing them to manipulate objects, climb, and even operate simple devices like touchpads, door handles, or even disabling maglocks. Both of the
clever girl.
Both of the clawed upper limbs and hand-like lower limbs have a thumb, which allows them to either snip through ceramite like scissors or manipulate things that they find. But as a quick note, the number of claws or digits on any of their hands can actually change by I wanted to say strain. Strain's not the right word. Essentially by planet. You know, if they take over a certain species or if they take over a certain culture, they might have more or less fingers. Another thing to note is that a lot like the xenomorph in the Alien franchise, a lot of times on their manipulator hands, 2 of their fingers will be kind of fused or joined together. They've got that
I noticed that in a lot of the pictures. It almost looks like if you were going to do the Spock, but at the end of your fingertips, it was fused together. So it's like how, like your knuckles,
like one
you got like 2 and 2. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It'd be a mean hand job.
They're definitely very based on the Alien, and we'll get a little bit more into that as we go along. Genestealer heads are bulbous and house a disproportionately large brain for such a single-minded killer. Its jaws are filled with razor-sharp needle teeth designed to rip and shred, and like most other tyrannids, they do not possess molars. So they are not grinding any of their food. They are ripping it apart and sucking it the fuck down. Their heads are often also protected by exoskeleton carapace crests. They've basically got this, like, ridge towards their eyes that extends back a little bit, and then the backs of their heads are soft. Or more soft. They're like leathery.
Like Mars Attacks, you know, like when their little brains
like
you slap it and it's like an ass almost, you know, it kind of jiggles.
It jiggles.
They possess an internal skeleton as well as an external exoskeleton carapace. Their armored carapace acts as a primary layer of armor, a lot like heavy plate, while the sinuous muscle fibers and leathery skin just below are most easily compared to standard Imperial flak armor as far as its durability is concerned. So they're just naturally armored the fuck up. Their armor and internal skeleton will thicken based on their body mass. So a Genestealer strain that has infected an Orkoid host will be bigger but slower, while a Genestealer strain that has infected an Eldari host will be slimmer and much faster. In isolation, they are typically blue, indigo in coloration with darker tones on their armored exoskeletons and more purplish coloration on their leathery heads and limbs. So that very, very stereotypical Space Hulk color scheme is what they revert to when they're either isolated or when they're cut off from their hive fleets. Which I thought was interesting. Which I did not know. I thought that was pretty fucking cool.
Yeah, I thought it was a per hive fleet kind of thing, but that's pretty interesting. Yeah.
This is the most common coloration when encountered on a Space Hulk, and also to the moons of Yamagral. The moons of Yamagral, my girl? Okay. The Yumes of Yamagral are also notable for being one of the places that the tentacled variant can be encountered. When Genestealers are encountered as part of a hive fleet, they will take on the hive fleet or splinter's distinct coloration. So if they're in a hive fleet or if they're attached to a hive fleet, they'll have that hive fleet's coloration.
So since I'm sure Marky wants to know, go on about the tentacle variant.
Oh, we're getting there. Hive fleet-based Genestealers center around an alpha predator known as a broodlord. This is distinctly different from a patriarch. A patriarch's broodmind is encompassed by all the members of a Genestealer cult, and that Genestealer cult can number in the tens of thousands to millions, if not higher. A broodlord's broodmind is limited to the size of its own pack. So, in theory, A brood lord is much less psychically potent because he's only got 20-ish minds, maybe 40-ish minds in his brood mind, in its brood mind. I should stop saying his, as to where a patriarch is going to have a much larger ability and a much wider variation and be stronger because of it, because it's able to tap into millions, if not more, at once.
Yeah, essentially a whole hive colony
or planet.
or planet.
When a Genestealer pack is cut off from its hive fleet, they will evolve into their pure strain form, their life cycle becoming optimized around infecting new hosts once they find a viable feeding ground. Unlike some other bioforms, Genestealers do consume food and are capable of reproduction, which is one of the big differences that marks them out as kind of being separate from Tyranids as a whole. However, most Tyranids do sport an open circulatory system with hemomolefin flooding their inner cellular chambers, a system which is packed with phage cells. This replaces the standard digestive system that we understand as bipedal mammals. This is something that smaller insects do. They don't necessarily have a digestive tract. They just, everything inside their exoskeleton digests stuff. In most Tyranid bioforms, that digested stuff sits there until they feed themselves into digestional pools and then are taken to the capillary towers back up to the hive fleet. So the Tyranid itself, a Carnifex, for instance, might eat several hundred guardsmen and then go back to one of these digestible pools, throw itself willingly into the acid, be dissolved, and then feed the hive mind. Genestealers don't,
baby.
Yeah, Genestealers don't necessarily do that though.
Well, because Genestealers, well, they also do that when the hive mind eventually links back up with them, as I'm sure we'll get into later. But they also are able to function without the presence of the rest of the hive fleet as a solo, which would require them to then process some of their own nutrients and things like that. Because a normal Tyranid isn't expected to ever survive.
They're not expected to, but this like backup system of digestion does allow bioforms that are abandoned or lost to survive by consuming food. Even
all
though
bioforms
it's not,
have this?
Or is even though it's not a traditional digestive system. So it's not a traditional digestive system. It is a like redundant digestive system. So if they're cut off from the hive fleet for an amount of time, they can survive and it will kick in. And this is also why like an abandoned...
Life finds a way.
Yeah, exactly. This is also why like an abandoned Carnifex on the planet of Catachan could several hundred generations later have evolved into the Catachan Devil and stuff like that.
Right.
However, Genestealers often also possess the remains of their host's species, organs, and internal systems, as well as having a vestigial digestive system, with some variants even continuing to have standard stomachs. It's important to note that we talk about the Tyranids as being a single race, but the Tyranids are a mixture of all of the things that the Tyranid race has found advantageous. So in a lot of ways, the Tyranids are a mix of races, not one alien race.
Take all these races, put them in a blender, and scoop up the good bits.
Right?
Pretty much.
So xenobiology...
It's like the Borg.
Yes, in a lot of ways. It's
very much the same concept as the Borg, where
the Borg are the
your
same
cultural...
concept as the Tyranids.
That's, I mean, chicken egg there.
When Tyranids encounter something that is advantageous to their evolution, they will incorporate
their biological
it into their
distinctiveness
biomass.
Will be added to their own.
Yeah. So it's very likely that Genestealers were their own alien species at one point, and the Tyranids were like, oh, this is really useful. And they kept
let's make more of these.
That's actually kind of an interesting concept.
That doesn't super surprise me, considering that there's like a bunch of really like whack ways that animals breed.
Oh yeah,
and then
Genestealers,
and that's just on
a whack way,
right? But like the way that Genestealers breed almost doesn't even like wouldn't surprise me if there was like a deep sea slug that did the same thing.
Yeah.
Like, that wouldn't surprise me at all, because there's weird, like, I mean, I just learned today how pufferfish, like, breed, and that the males essentially just get absorbed into the female.
Oh, yeah. Anglerfish do that, too. Anglerfish.
Maybe it was anglerfish. I don't remember. One of these
the
weird, creepy sea things is the scientists could only find females, and they're like, "What the fuck?" And then they put it under a microscope, and they found out that the males are basically just like,
they're really small,
and they start out a little bigger, but they
attach.
basically just absorb into the side of the female.
They start sucking. They start like pilot fish sucking on the side of the female, and as more time goes on, the female's body starts to absorb them.
What the fuck?
Yeah, and like knowing that there's creatures that do that, like Genestealers don't surprise me at all. That's totally viable.
Genestealers
it's almost
are
like
actually
like bot flies, but like the host is actually being controlled by the fly instead of
in a way
just being using it as a host to be born.
Yeah. Genestealers have a lot of reproductive systems that are very, very similar to like wasps and flies and stuff like insects like that. We'll get into that.
It's kind of like the tarantula hawk wasp in a way.
Plants its babies,
yeah. But instead, it's implanting.
Well,
there's DNA.
Actually
instead of eggies.
Instead of eggs, it's a DNA, like almost like a virus that recodes the host.
There's a bacteria found in cat feces.
Yeah.
That when a rat eats it, it grows inside of the rat brain and seeks out cats.
It makes the rat like cats or whatever.
Oh, it makes the rat go do dumb shit to get itself eaten.
To get eaten.
Yeah.
And oddly enough,
it's similar to the way that cordyceps possesses ants.
Yeah.
It's not exactly the same.
The fungus thing?
Yeah, the
thing
brain
from Last of
fungus.
Us?
Yeah. So that they actually just did more research, and turns out it doesn't infect the brain, which is really funny because that's what everybody thought it does. But it turns out that it actually extends into the muscles themselves and possesses the muscles via direct, like, puppeteering almost.
Damn.
Rather than going to your brain and then poking your brain to make the brain send the signal itself.
And here's something that'll freak you out, maybe even a little bit more, Marky, since you just made this connect. That Tom's talking about, the Beast is talking about, can also infect humans, which is why certain people collect lots of fucking cats.
Crazy cat ladies.
So
that's
speculative. That is speculative. But yeah, that's kind of the example.
What do we say in podcast? Allegedly.
Allegedly.
Yeah, that's.
I mean, that could almost lead to like ancient Egyptian culture where they like.
Well, but that's so. If you think of like how people cat shit and cat piss is so potent.
Yeah.
But there are people that don't smell it.
Right.
Yeah.
That's because of that bacteria.
So I like that you brought up.
Yeah, I was just don't say it too loud. But
that brings up one of my old favorite jokes about ancient Egypt. And this was a while ago, but it's kind of funny because it actually
it's just a giant cat box.
No. Ancient Egypt was the original designers of Facebook because they put their faces up on a wall, and then eventually they just started covering those walls with pictures of cats.
Yeah, right. There you go.
So to get back onto Genestealers, xenobiologists understand that Genestealers are able to change rapidly even within inside a single generation. So they're capable of rapid mutation, with the difference between broods or generations showing significant leaps. So if a generation of pure strain Genestealers on a Space Hulk encounters Deathwing Terminators, their next generation may specifically evolve the forward scything blades to go through ceramite faster and better. The my girl. What do you say? You screwed me up with your bad pronunciation. Girl. The Weimagral Genestealers are unique as they possess the ability to alter their own flesh to react to incoming attacks, as well as changing their coloration like a chameleon. So they're able to do it in real time.
Damn, so they're almost like lictors, like death leapers almost.
A little bit. So these Genestealers exploited a large sentient leech-like creature called a scythe, or a scythe. A Kasith. It's a C and then the word Sith. Scythe. By using this population as hosts, they developed a more inhuman appearance. Also notably, a Scythe host always produces natural Yamagral Genestealers no matter what parentage of the previous generation. It's also these guys that are known to generate the tentacles more often. So the tentacle-faced Genestealer, as well as the tentacled arm variant. The Imperium,
I have been wondering about them.
The tentacle ones?
Yeah, the tentacle ones.
Why is that?
They're neat.
Yeah, we playing Deathwing. I was always like, I don't remember seeing these motherfuckers. You know, like, that Cthulhu-looking motherfucker. You know,
A lot of people don't use the heads. I actually really like the heads, so I've like sought them out to put them on more of my Genestealers. But a lot of people like the Acid Maw heads because the Acid Maw gives you an extra attack. But you can only take 1 per 5, so I don't understand why people put like 12 of them in a fucking brood. Anyway.
Look cool.
That's true. The Imperium originally thought that Genestealers were a semi-intelligent race having evolved on the moons of Yamagral itself, seeing the Yamagral variant as the standard for the entire race. However, as more incursions took place, it became obvious to the Ordo Xenos that they were just the vanguard organism of the Tyranid hive fleets. They are now classified as a subservient or servient bioform to the Tyranids. Genestealers act as infiltrators and vanguards, single bioforms or isolated packs hitching a ride on space hulks, or stowing away as a single predator on an unwary passenger ship, ready to infiltrate a hive city and start a new cult. So, as you guys kind of guessed, or as we'll probably continue to hear, Genestealers and Tyranids are pretty heavily intertwined. Until it gets to the aspect of this infiltration and infection cycle, this is where shit gets pretty deep into body horror, and it's pretty easy to link a lot of aspects of the Genestealers and their cults to the Alien movie franchise. From here on out, this episode is going to enter into a so-called Gold Star territory. I don't know, guys. Gold Star is like the standard. Shit's going to get real specific and kind of creepy and a little uneasy to talk about, but we're a 40k themed podcast, so we need something better than Gold Star. What, like Gold Rosette? This is Gold Rosette territory. What are we gonna name it? Give me some names, guys.
I don't understand the reference.
So Gold Star is, you're gonna get a Gold Star for listening to all of the man. So the reference is, do you know the tapes Red Asphalt that they would show in like driving courses?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sitting through one of those is a Gold Star achievement. You get a Gold Star. You sat through that horrible shit.
No,
you don't know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Okay, so Red Asphalt was a bunch of footage of drunk driving accidents that they showed to teenagers that were like literally like, by the way, if you guys didn't get the trigger warning that I alluded to at Gold Star, major right here, where like people would go and scoop brains of dead teenagers up with like spoons to put them in bags.
It was like a dustpan bucket.
Yeah.
You never saw that video?
What the fuck
are
you guys
never
talking
seen
about?
Red Asphalt?
In Driver's Ed, it was a movie, and it's literally called Red Asphalt, and it's visceral cleanup detail.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's the guys that go out to...
Basically, it's scare tactics.
It's like, imagine if to get your driver's license...
It's like Dare showing you a bunch of crackheads.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's that,
Right.
but for car accidents.
Yeah.
So it's like...
But that's
people
like
who didn't wear their seatbelt and that like got ejected from a vehicle and left a 20-foot red skid mark. It's the dude like scooping that off the road.
Yeah. And
So when
and what he's referring to is that if you watched that, you received a Gold Star.
Right.
So
Which
he's
harkens
referring
back to like in kindergarten, if you colored within the lines, you got a Gold Star.
okay, I get that, but I didn't understand like the tie between the two of why that's a Gold Star.
Because you were able to watch the terrible things.
I never actually heard that either. Like,
So you watched Mom's
know
World and you
I didn't
you get a
know.
Gold Star.
I was gonna say, I was like, where I was going is I was gonna be like, World Star.
Well, that's why I was like, it's used in, I've heard it used in a lot of like true crime documentary stuff. Like, hey, it's going to get real from here on out. So if you're going to be uncomfortable with real, you should check out now. And I generally don't like saying trigger warning. So like, that's why I was like, what do we do in the 40k universe?
Viewer discretion.
Talk about
Viewer discretion is advised.
This is
warning. Parental discretion advised. We're gonna say fuck a lot.
Audio discretion.
you get a purity seal if you sit through this.
Yeah,
there you go.
There you go. This is a purity.
That's a good one.
From
This
here
purity
on out.
seal.
From here on out, the episode's going to be a bit purity sealy. There you go.
Yeah,
So,
that's good.
Genestealers are a horror monster in pretty much every sense of the word. Their design and function falls deep into a mix of Cronenberg and H.R. Giger styles and ideas of body horror, down to the weird dash of psychosexualism that comes from that original design of the xenomorph. If you guys haven't seen or species. If you haven't seen the original sketches that Giger did that led to the xenomorph, and even or seen interviews with him, the guy had a weird, horrid fascination with human sexuality. Like, it literally horrified him in a way, which is why he painted the way he painted.
And that explains a lot, because a lot of his work either
weird
looks like a penis
or a vagina,
or both,
or that going into a girl's mouth,
right? Or things going into mouths.
Mouth, yeah.
Like it's all very either sexual or
it's
reproductive.
Very R word.
Yeah,
it's
very, definitely borderline that.
Yeah, very grapey.
To not to mince words anymore. The xenomorph in the Alien franchise is an allegory for rape. And the reason that it infects a male and a male is the victim was because they were the guys that wrote it, that made it, were trying to make a very clear point about how awful it was. Genestealers are built on that same body horror idea. They're cool, they're neat, they're a great monster, but they are based on absolute fucking horror. They're not
literal
really.
I was going to say hand fucking.
Literal fucking horror.
Fucking
horror. They're not meant to be something that we like.
Oh, that's the whole word. It's hyphenated.
It's like one word.
It's hyphenated.
Fucking horror.
It's hyphenated. Fucking horror.
Yeah.
It's like action horror, but fucking horror.
Yeah, fucking horror.
But be realistic when we look at monsters like this. The thing that makes the monster horrible is not something that we should really venerate. I think Genestealers are very, very neat, and I think they're cool, and I love playing them on the table. And I think the ideas of Genestealer cults are awesome horror and horror.
They are successfully horrifying.
Yeah.
But I am not saying that is a lifestyle or anything that I personally would ever subscribe to or follow. It's
I think that goes unsaid.
It's horror. Yeah. It's just, we're laying it out. We're not, not to tiptoe
That's true.
around
I mean, for some people, they'll be like, oh my God, Ryan likes grapey stuff.
It's true.
Oh man, you're such a fan of that grape flavor.
I know.
Genestealers spread.
Grape soda.
Genestealers spread into the Imperium in two different ways. Tens of thousands of them might have infested and taken over an entire space hulk, eating and converting and infesting anything that they've come into contact with. Oftentimes, these infestations are not just limited to Genestealers, but mix in a lot of the other spy craft or vanguard species that Tyranids have, such as, Marky, you brought it up earlier, the Lictor. Several brood lords might be spread or present throughout a single drifting hulk, and even variant Genestealers that are not based on human stock. A space hulk like this drifting into a system can spell doom for an entire sector when these released hordes of Genestealers descend in mass on worlds to wipe them clean, even without the help of a hive fleet. Their numbers just keep growing.
Yeah, think of like the little tendrils or spores that the Tyranids just shotgun blast out into the galaxy, and whatever they hit. And if whatever they hit decides to scream bloody murder like a dinner bell, that's the direction they go.
Yep.
I always kind of thought of it kind of like they're essentially like loaded onto boarding torpedoes and just blasted.
And just start blasting. Yeah.
Well, so what happens a lot of times, the reason that the Imperium reacts to space hulks the way they do is that because this has been a problem in the past. And in general, this is not the Genestealer cult. We're getting into them as from here forward. But up to this
is the
point,
initial phases of Genestealer cult.
Right. Or there's just so many fucking Genestealers that have built up a population on the Space Hulk that they don't need to make a cult. They just kill everything. They skip straight to go and collect their $200. They're not playing the rest of Monopoly.
Yeah, usually
there's just too many of them. It's over.
Yeah, the lesser amount of Tyrannid or Genestealer like presence, the more they're going to go into hiding and infiltration, where if there's more of them, they're just going to collect whatever biomass and crap that they want, and then they're going to find a way to spread out even more or take out whatever decides to come on their ship, because it's their ship now.
So, however...
Yeah, only they get to come on their ship.
Yeah. Only one coming here is me.
However, the more insidious method is that of a single Genestealer stowed away on a transport ship, which can spread like a virus throughout space lanes, spelling a slow decline and ever-approaching doom of a hive fleet to an entire sector. These solitary infiltrators are cunning, utilizing stealth and murder to secure their base of operations. Once they arrive on a planet with a sufficiently large and developed population, from this secret lair, in the space of just a few years, the creature will begin to abduct hundreds of civilians, inserting Tyrannid genetic code into the victim in order to infect and enslave them to its will. These infected civilians give birth to vile hybrids of human and Xenos form, with the first generation being unmistakably alien. However, with the next few generations, those born get closer to passing as humans, able to further spread the corruption of the cult throughout society. Specialized hybrids are born as the cult expands, which are better used to spread the cult's influence.
Why is the Genestealer so angry?
He's not angry, he just wants to fuck a lot, like a rabbit.
But I thought it was because he had all them jeans and no belt.
Womp womp. Marky, hit the thing. Hit the thing. He did a womp womp.
Tom's right there. He's got to hit it. But
I literally thought of that today as I was putting on my belt. I was like,
you're like, Genestealer joke.
Gotta have a belt to make.
Is that what you were talking about all day today about the joke?
That was this joke.
Wow, how anticlimactic.
I know. I said it wasn't good. It's funny, but it's not good.
You hit it pretty good though. Yeah. It was snug it in there.
So eventually, as a population grows large enough, be it months or even years, the cult will stop acting in the shadows and openly march on a war path to war. This triggers the first Genestealer, the stowaway, now a patriarch of the cult, to call all his followers to rise up. This normally triggers bloody planet-wide civil wars, but in some cases, several planets may have already become infected by a single patriarch, meaning an entire system might go on a warpath to drag down subsectors. The cults act with coordination of a single mind, the brood mind being the will of the patriarch, striking at vital communication and power systems, cutting off the planet or system's ability to even call for help. As this is happening, the patriarch will send out a signal in the warp, a beacon to the nearby hive fleets, signaling that a planet is ripe with biomass and ready for harvest. While the cultists, abominations, and other generations are just so much biomass for the Tyrannids to consume, the Purestein Genestealers can then spread to new worlds that will fall in the same way. They could head out alone or in small groups, each more than capable of becoming a new patriarch on his own. This goes into that spore reference you made earlier. You know, when you hit a spore, it just spreads all the little spores everywhere else. Sure, you've destroyed that spore, but now there's going to be like fucking 20 mushrooms tomorrow, man.
Yeah, it's just going to start sporing everywhere. Just coming.
Sporing everywhere. Sporing into my sinuses.
Jesus Christ, spore me this morning.
I really need the soundboard. Really use the soundboard right now.
Genestealers are inhumanly patient and can wait years sustaining themselves on very little while they look for their perfect lair. These are the darkest, most hidden, and twisted maze, either on the outskirts of a populated city or deep in the underhive, or even the sumps of some hive worlds. Only when they feel perfectly secure will they venture out, stalking and lurking after potential victims, ambushing those that live on the fringes or in the dregs of society, taking them in very brutal, rapid assaults. However, unlike most Tyrannids, a swift and violent death is not this victim's fate. Using their hypnotic gaze, the single Genestealer will hold its victim captive before impregnating them with a portion of their own genetic material. This is delivered with the use of an ovipositor, and this process is known, Marky, as the
Genestealer's besito. Mwah.
The Genestealer kiss. Their ovipositor is as an aside, an ovipositor is a tubular ribbed organ which a female insect or fish uses to deposit their eggs into a victim. In the case of the Genestealer, the ovipositor is generally their tongue. And it is developed into a whip-like muscle that is often tipped with like a spike or a claw. And this is thrust into the victim's skin. So it doesn't have to, this thing is not French kissing you with its razor teeth. It's, it grabs you and it could just shove its tongue into your neck or your chest or your back.
Since
it doesn't
all it's
really matter.
Your ass.
They're not really injecting eggs into people. They're injecting
genetic
just their
material.
Genetic DNA in a way.
And then
So
that
really
affects-
it just has to get you. It doesn't really matter where.
It just has to get
Right.
under your skin.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
not like, face huggers that it's like a
It's
specific
like puts it
process.
in you.
Yeah. That it's like delivering eggs into your stomach and then, a little alien collects your genetic DNA and pops out and then it kind of looks like
Yeah.
you.
But there's
It's not like.
There's nothing aside from like the same intent of cold-blooded murder in this act. The Genestealer is literally just shoving its blade into your body and leaving its DNA. That's it. It
Slow
doesn't.
death.
Is there any lore
really
that
care.
discusses like how long the process takes, or if it's like
It's hazy, but it's hazy and defined. So the gene virus spreads throughout the victim, who is by now in a deep state of unconsciousness or coma, and alters their DNA and their mind. The mind altering forces.
Think of it like Spider-Man, like the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, where he got bit, and then like the next morning he was like, "What the fuck?" It's like, I got muscles. This dude's like, I really want to fuck a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, so it knocks you unconscious and a bunch of other stuff. So it's not like it could just like you fucked.
No. It's a process.
It's a process. Yeah.
But they there's a lot of things that the Genestealer kind of shares with not a modern, but a contemporary horror monster that isn't the xenomorph. They share a lot with vampires. Vampires are also incredibly invasive in the way they act. They're essentially taking something from you without your permission.
The patriarch aspect.
The hypnotizing aspect. If a Genestealer, so a Genestealer ambushes you and then looks into your eyes, and upon looking into its eyes, you're hypnotized. You are fucking stuck, and you kind of turn into a meat puppet, and then it fucking jabs you with its DNA tongue, and then all of that shit alters your mind.
DNA tongue,
and it
for its
builds.
pleasure.
It builds as it's altering your DNA. It's building into your mind that the Genestealer is a Masonic figure. This is the first step of this like religion, this obsessive religion that the Genestealer cults use. The entire process, here to answer your question, usually takes just a couple of solar hours or a few solar hours. They don't say it takes 2. They don't say it takes 5. They say it takes a few, which to me means anywhere between
if they get
2
you
and
at
5.
night, if they get you at night by morning, you're screwed.
Yep.
Now, if I cut off my arm,
and does it have to essentially stay attached to you that whole time?
No.
Okay.
Nope.
So it probably has to just get like one good bite on you. So
let's say it bites my foot.
Uh-huh.
I lop my leg off.
Well, it's not. You're
could
thinking,
be saved.
You're thinking of a zombie, though. You're thinking of like, I watched it happen and I can act on compulsion. This is more like Dracula. Dracula has you in his eyesight.
Oh, yeah.
You're already unconscious.
But say Marky's being eaten on by a Genestealer.
And Kevin lops my leg off.
And I walk around a corner, I'm like, you son of a bitch, get off my friend. Blam! And then I chop his leg off or whatever.
My leg off.
Son of a
And then
bitch.
it's over. And then it's over. Genestealer wiped out, entire planet saved.
Yeah.
And then
I mean,
Daka.
yeah, in theory, I suppose that could work.
Yeah, if you got it fast enough, because it
I
does
was
sound
saved
like
by my cousin Jab.
it sounds like it does follow biological law of like virus rewriting DNA, which would, depending on where it got you in relations to your blood vessels and everything, would take some time to spread.
It does take some time to spread. So
I mean, if it had been 20-30 minutes, it would have spread too far by that point.
However, this might change your mind. No matter how violent the abduction and subsequent penetration is, the victim always wakes back up without a mark and is completely whole. So even if you do struggle and it does, like, say it shoots into your neck and like you have enough wherewithal to like pull away and it like rips a huge chunk and your jugular starts spurting, you go into a coma and your body heals because the Genestealer DNA is now in you. And when you wake up, you have no memory that happened. You have no pain that happened, and you don't have a mark on you.
Yeah, so it would only work in this instance that you're talking about.
Yeah.
That you watched it happen.
Like somebody found it while it was still attached to you.
Yeah.
Kevin turns around the corner and the patriarch's balls deep in my neck.
Yeah.
And Kevin's like, nah.
You're only on your first glork. It hasn't second glorked you yet.
So technically, if you are the very first victim, it's not the patriarch yet. And if it's already the patriarch, it's still just a Genestealer. And if it's already a patriarch, and Marky, you probably already know this, it already has abominations, which are doing the exact same thing. So,
yeah, of course.
Oh, so the abominations spread it the same way?
Yes.
Everything spreads it that way.
Oh, I thought it was essentially the Genestealer / patriarch.
Except for third and fourth generation, which can do it reproductively. Like
okay, that's what I thought it essentially was for everybody after the first gen.
Yeah. So as soon as you're infected with their DNA, your entire bloodline is doomed forever. Fucking ever.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, the one thing that they don't ever allude to is that after you're infected, because obviously once you're infected, you get hit with that tongue. You don't have a tongue yourself, right? You don't have an ovipositor.
Right, you don't have one.
You go and fuck.
Yeah.
But they don't say like, you don't have, they're like, oh, he gets hit with the ovipositor, now he has the strong urge to fuck. It's like, now he just goes.
Well, yeah, because they're not just going to, that's something they're not just going to blatantly just say.
Yeah. So these victims,
because they never outright say that Slaanesh Space Marines, do things to people, but it's heavily alluded to what they do to people.
There is an Emperor's Children Space Marine in Penitent, which is the first Beckwin novel, named Teki, who is fucking creepy as shit. I thought he was a custode at first because of the way that he was like described as being like all oiled up and only wearing a loincloth and like very, very handsome and pretty with golden eyes. But then like the longer he talks, the more I'm like, oh fuck, this is an Emperor's Children. And then when he reveals, I'm like, oh, that guy's creepy as fuck.
But like they never, so like in the Siege of Terra, they talk about how the Emperor's Children eventually kind of leave the front lines to go do terrible things to civilians.
Pillage and
pillage and other things.
Yeah.
But they never really tell you exactly what they do, but
the lore, So the lore is really weird on Space Marines. Most of the official, and this is not a Space Marine episode, most of the official lore states that Space Marines do not have sexual compulsion or sexual organs anymore. So
but
when traded Marines,
they don't have wieners.
They don't. It's not that they don't have it. It's more that like it just doesn't.
It's just not important to them.
It's not important to them.
Yeah, it's when you have on steroids. It shrivels up.
Space Marines, for all intent and purpose, are no longer human and do not sexually reproduce. Like the changes done to their body make them not what we see as male or female.
Yeah, but Slaanesh is like Viagra. So
Slaanesh is everything in excess, and I think that that's the thing that a lot of people like miss.
Forget. Yeah, it's everything.
Yeah, it's not.
And it's not just excess, but it's also perfection.
Hedonism is not. I want to fuck everything. The joke of hedonism is I want to fuck everything because everybody goes back to that idea of like Rome. Rome fell because of all of the origin parties. But hedonism is literally like, I am obsessed with finding the perfect color red. I will not do anything I will forsake everything else in my life, including my family, my children, my responsibilities, and eating, to find the perfect color red. Like that's what it is. So, and that's how myopic it can be. It can be, Jim Bob might be obsessed with red. Susan might be obsessed with the perfect like fur carpet. Rebecca might be obsessed with the perfect note, not even a song.
Could you say I'm hedonistic about my dick and fart jokes?
Yes.
Wow. Yes, you are on a quest to perfect.
You guys
the dick
did not like
no stop, just fucking flat in there.
Yeah,
No
did
hesitation.
we fucking stutter?
Wow.
Like,
But at the same time, Space Marine lore also does suggest that the Space Wolves do engage in some form of sexual play. And it does heavily suggest that the Space Marine Trader Legions who specify, or not specify, but who have specialities in terrorism use things that terrify humans. And if that is something that terrifies humans, then they're going to use it. Now, does that mean that they're using the thing from Seven that that Kevin Spacey makes the dude fuck the hooker to death with? My guess is yes, that's probably what it is. It's probably not them doing it. It's probably them using chain swords to do it or whatever.
It's like the descriptions of Slanesh demons doing similar things.
Right.
They're doing, they describe it as,
they're going to worm in. They're going to use your
sexualized
pleasure.
acts, but they never state more than that. But then they also talk about all this other terrible stuff they're doing.
Right.
It's like one little line that it discusses that it involves, things of an erotic nature. It's like 7 lines about how they're flaying the skin while they're doing it.
It's very easy to use sex to push the idea of like lust and like excess. It's sex, drugs, and rock and roll are from a Western cultural like perspective. That is how the last 60 years of rock and roll has been compared to hedonism. So that it's kind of just an easy rut. And that's what happens. Slaanesh uses Gladstone. Slaanesh uses Flex. Slaanesh uses Low. Slaanesh uses Obscura. Slaanesh uses Sex. Like that's how it's always like kind of gotten to. Now, Slaanesh also made Fulgrim paint a painting with blood and feces because he was trying to get the perfect tones. No one really likes to talk about the fact that a Primarch painted with poop, but they want to talk about, did the Primarch's followers have sex?
And then didn't somebody else build a house out of flesh?
Yeah. That Slaanesh is fun.
Yeah,
we'll get
built
there.
a house out of flesh. Like, see, there's all kinds of like really weird
Purity Seal
stuff.
episodes.
Yeah, Purity Seal great episodes.
Yeah. Don't break the seal unless you're prepared.
So these first
these
victims, these first victims of the Genestealer are known as the Contagi. Was that Mark? You're gonna have to help me on this. Contagi. Contagii.
State.
Where
I don't know where you're at.
Perfect. Page 7.
I think we're further
Victims bloodline forever, blah blah blah.
Yeah, it's right after that. It's the very next one. These victims are referred to as the Contagi.
Contagi.
That would make sense
Contagi?
because of infection. Yeah.
So these
I
first victims
is pronounced E.
Yeah, contagion.
It's like Skitari,
But
but it's
so
like
these
an
are-
E.
Yeah, so they're referred to
Drawn
as the
out too.
Contagi, which makes sense, or the infected. As soon as the first Contagi is created, the Genestealer becomes the Patriarch. So as soon as that first process is achieved, that Genestealer becomes a Patriarch. So
And it's
as a
essentially that mind link
Exactly.
is what
Yes.
triggers the Patriarch kind of evolution.
it starts the brood. It jump starts the brood
the
mind.
mini hive mind. Yeah.
That's cool.
So
that it's like
as
it has
a-
the potential, but it doesn't activate until it
It's not
actually
there yet.
creates.
Yeah, because it can fail as a patriarch. I mean, if it gets caught before it develops
Before it
a hive
makes it,
mind,
yep.
then it's just a failed Genestealer.
And that doesn't
It's
that
just a
wouldn't lead the
singular
hive mind
Genestealer.
anywhere to follow, so
Right.
it doesn't even
Right.
start beaconing until that
Correct.
makes sense.
So as a quick aside, Genestealers are technically genderless, hosting the genetic material for both sexes inside their ovipositor. They lack any other reproductive organs, and they reproduce by infecting a host species. or by being birthed directly in a hive fleet. So the hive fleet can create them. I can't remember what they're called. The birth mothers or they've got a name. Is it dominatrix that we'll get to when we deep dive into tyrannids. We'll talk about the organism that births things. I think
like the queen,
Norn queens.
It's not the Norn queen. Maybe it is the Norn queen. There's the dominatrix.
Like
there's the Norn queen.
The one that nobody's like ever seen.
Yeah,
yes.
The brain bug.
It was the strain lord or something like that.
Yeah, it's more akin to a factory process than a like birth. This
like
means
the alien queen.
Yeah. This means that while we look at it from a human perspective, Genestealers don't have to infect humans. Notably, Orkoids and Eldari have been infected in the past. Also, from a horror movie perspective, we often look at Genestealers operating as a lone monster stalking a starship, much like an alien. While this does happen, they are a vanguard of a much larger force, so quite often several will reach a planet at once. And this is getting into what you guys are talking about. So the first Genestealer that makes the first cognite, excuse me.
Contagi.
I keep mixing up with cognite. The first contagi becomes the Primarch, but there might be 15, 16 Genestealers all trying to do this at the same time. It's whoever makes the first connection becomes the Patriarch, and then those other Genestealers basically go, oh, we now know who boss is. Let's go find boss.
I mean, this once again, I mean, and the only reason I keep thinking about this is because Tom brought up the Borg previously, and that's also similar to the Borg. Yeah, when a members of the collective were separated, they kind of essentially formed their own mini collective, and the one to first like process the fact that they are forming a second collective is the one that kind of like takes charge,
becomes the boss.
Yeah.
So the last point, we use the term patriarch because the structure of a Genestealer cult follows, as the name suggests, a cult. And the cult of majority for the humans in 40k is known as the Imperial cult. So whether or not it is easy to talk about, a religion only becomes a religion when enough people follow it. It's kind of like that idea of one man's terrorist, another man's freedom fighter, or the winner writes the history. The reason that we look at the major religions as being major religions is because they are followed by a lot of people. And the reason that we look at cults as being cults is because they're followed by not so many people. So since the figurehead of the Imperial cult or the Imperial religion is the God Emperor and is identified as a male, and humans built the references for the framework of the Genestealers, even though Genestealers don't give a shit about sexual identity or even have a concept of sex or any sort of genetic determiner which says what sex they are, the Patriarch is the name associated to it by us, by humans in the 40k universe. So effectively, the Patriarch becomes a he as far as the way that we discuss the Patriarch, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. I mean, I always kind of like rolled that around in my head a little bit about calling my Patriarch a matriarch because of how the alien and queen, the alien queen is. And I just thought it'd be cool. Like, hey, it's my matriarch. It's my alien queen.
You know, have you ever thought about...
Well, and if the society that they fall into, for whatever reason, follows the emperor or goddess, there would be no reason that they wouldn't call her the matriarch. And the empire, the Imperial cult allows for that because at the end of the day, as long as you're within that like 75% hazy range, they're like, whatever.
Good enough.
However you see the God Emperor, essentially, right?
Right.
Well, yeah, it's like how on Fenris they call him the Allfather, and nobody cares that that's what they call him. It serves the same purpose.
But in a lot of respects, the way that 40k is written is as directly as a satire towards like the Catholic Church and government in general. So that's why a lot of this stuff has these names, because the guys that wrote this shit are poking fun at people.
You should make another patriarch, but dress him up as like a priest.
As a poop?
as either a pope or like a cardinal.
But it's like a patriarch just wearing a cardinal.
Literally, like with the big old head, a fucking robe and with the stick and everything.
Well, that would be dope. In the Pope mobile.
Oh my god!
But it's still just a Genestealer.
It's a Genestealer, but in a Pope hat with a robe.
Like,
oh, it's so fucking awesome. So the Contagi returns to their life as normal. They marry, or maybe just fuck a bunch, and eventually they have kids. Their entire drive at this point becomes to reproduce and have children. These kids are always hybrid offspring. They're hideous and grotesque, misshapen creatures who can be varied in their form. However, they share a lot of Genestealer traits. Big heads, extra arms, needle teeth, the tail stump. They also often sport the traditional coloration of non-Hive Genestealers. So these guys, abominations, this first generation, literally have fucking purple and blue skin. Like that, in general.
And they're loved like they're actual children.
Yep.
They're not treated like, oh my God, what did I give birth to? It's that is my child.
That would make sense.
So the partner you slept with, in theory, might have that reaction, but the more you sleep with that partner, and this is assumed based on the way that some of the lore fiction is written, the more times you engage in sexual congress with that partner, the more you're spreading the Genestealer's DNA, the Patriarch's DNA to them.
So then
eventually they'll become part of it.
Yeah, I essentially thought, I don't think it says that anywhere, but you obviously share genetic material with your significant other when you
engage in activities.
Reproductive activities. The
patriarchs
infect them with that, the Genestealer DNA, while
it's
the
like
patriarch
the
is going out and
doing its thing.
It's like the T virus in a lot of ways. Like the T virus in the Resident Evil series very much was built as an allegory to AIDS. And AIDS is a genetic, just like the T virus, is a genetic virus that hops from body to body by swapping fluids. And the Patriarch's DNA virus probably works the same way. As soon as you swap fluids with somebody, it starts working on you. Now, that might mean that you have to engage 100 times for it to happen, but it's heavily implied that, like, in a marriage situation, both parents are immediately like, oh, my sweet baby boy, even though their neighbors are like, what the fuck is that thing? Why the hell is it in your house?
That's what happens in real life.
And then they
get a dog?
And then they spit in their mouth and they're like, he's beautiful, right? And they're like, you know what? Yeah, he is kind of cute.
What happens in real life anyway when somebody has a really ugly baby?
Dude, babies are ugly. I'm sorry to say it, but
like, angry potatoes.
Dude, like, don't get me wrong. Obviously, you see your own kids as beautiful and whatnot, but like babies are ugly.
I'm going to make your kids listen to the podcast in like 10 years and they're going to be like, Dad.
My kids didn't see what I saw. So,
hey man, I love the shit out of my niece. When I first saw her, I was like, I remember my sister holding her and she's like, oh, my little angel. And I was like, that baby's ugly. But I love her to death. Like, I don't care. Like, yeah, you can be ugly. I can still love you. It's cool.
It looks like it's sunburned.
An angry red potato.
Why is it staring at me like that?
So these initial...
Okay, got his eyes open yet. It's fine.
These initial hybrids are collectively known as the first generation. First generation hybrids are also enslaved to the will of the patriarch, and they will disappear when they are old enough and hide, often seeking out and joining the patriarch. These hybrids, this first generation, reproduce by abducting, hypnotizing, and ramming their ovipositor into their victims. So same cycle. They disappear, they start ambushing people and dragging them in the same way. These victims will in turn wake up, return to their normal lives, fuck a lot, which feeds into the cycle. However, the victims of the first generation hybrids birth second generation children. These second generation hybrids are stooped and hunched, although not like the infirm or old, more like an animal that's ready to explode into violence at even the slightest movement. They
so
often...
This generation essentially fucks each other and then gives birth to...
No, this generation is still ovipositor only. Second generation is still ovipositor only.
Really?
Yep. First and second generation can only reproduce the same way
through that ovipositor.
Through the ovipositor.
So then they infect people. Those people give birth to kids, but these kids look more human now.
Right. So the second generation out, the people that get abducted by hybrids go back to their normal life and have second generation children, second generation Genestealer children. These are hunched and stooped. They look like hunchbacks. They look a little bit more human, but they're still not quite there. They have 5 to 6 limbs. They're bald, but their eyes and mouths are much closer to those of their human parents, meaning that they can speak Low Gothic. Although their minds still work extremely alien ways, they do understand their host race's society and can blend into it. While weird, the Imperium is pretty full of twisted mutants, either through generations of inbreeding or flash cloning, or by exposure to weird chemicals and pollutants on several different hive worlds. These strange-looking but resilient and incredibly strong second-generation hybrids will often find work in the most dangerous jobs that appeal to the industrial subcultures that already accept mutants and twists. They are often able to operate crew-manned mining tools alone, making them incredibly valuable, and they're a lot more resilient when it comes to accidents with demolitions. So they'll get hired and hold these mining jobs because they're really fucking good at them. And
yeah, they'll look at
the
them
end
as
of the
abhumans, essentially, right?
Right.
Well, yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, if it's good for profits, don't ask too many questions.
100%. This is also the generation where hypnosis might not be the main tactic to reproduce. So here's where you're getting at, Marky. They can still hypnotize and use their ovipositor, but as mutant brothels exist on many worlds, and humans can often be less than discerning when it comes to their sexual desires, oftentimes in this particular case, the Genestealer kiss might happen during an actual passionate kiss. So in this case, there might be sex, but the sex isn't what's depositing the DNA. It's still the kiss. Make sense?
Yeah.
These victims just don't necessarily have to be ambushed, dragged into the dark. So this cycle repeats in the third generation of children being born are even more human with more upright stance, although they are still bald and have ridged head and violet to light blue skin tones, suggesting some form of skin mutation. This generation also can have extra limbs, but in general, they're incredibly easy to hide in clothing. The Saboteur model is definitely a third generation hybrid.
Mm-hmm.
They can fit even more into the host society, albeit mostly still in kind of an outlaw or low lifestyle. This generation is also the first generation that, like, if a third generation and a third generation shack up, they'll have a fourth generation child. They don't necessarily have to be ovipositored. They don't have to ovipositor. They can have kids normally. But if they're going to have a kid with a non-Genestealer hybrid, it's going to be through ovipositor, essentially. This is the first sustaining, self-sustaining sexual generation, essentially. So the fourth generation, and this is kind of where it gets a little bit murky. So the fourth generation are babies born to third generation parents. The fourth generation is indistinguishable from humans by physical appearance, although they might still retain exotic features such as different skin color or exotic eye colors, or elongated features. A lot of times the fourth generation, the Magus, Marky, there's four or five of them that are specialized. They all kind of have Nexos,
biophages,
and
all of those.
We'll dive into them a little bit more deeply in our next episode, but all of these models and all of the way that the artwork is done, they're done with that like alien exotic alluring look rather than that alien like what the fuck look.
Yeah,
like,
political officials are probably going to be fourth generation, stuff like that.
However, they still possess the expanded intelligence along with their connection to the patriarch, obviously, making them cunning and manipulative agents and leaders of the cult. They also express an above average tendency to psychic potential. It's also this generation where a lot of the specialized types start to appear, as they are more prone to find themselves, as Marky just mentioned, in the host society's leadership roles or positions of great political power, noble houses, stuff like that. Fourth generation hybrids breed like their host race. So in the case of humans, normal sex, but they do not give birth to untainted offspring. Instead, they give birth to pure strain Genestealers. So mama gives birth to a little tiny Genestealer, and all of its latest story.
It's so weird.
It's gnarly.
I've always had such a hard time understanding their like
process.
I'm like, why? Like you have like the first cross where it's like, oh, monster. Then it's like, oh, people. That monster again fooled you. You know.
So it's like an insect's life cycle, right? So you go through all of these different generational life cycles, but the end is okay. Now we need to get back to spreading and making a new hive. So the fourth generation is birthing pure gene stealers, and then the point of those pure gene stealers is they can now spread to other populations either on that same city and become either patriarchs in their own right, but this doesn't always happen. They may just become a pure gene stealer who spreads the patriarch's influence in a different city, but is linked to his control.
Because you got to think like 4 generations down, and they're by the point where they're giving birth, or the 4th generation are giving birth, that is so far down the line, and they're like,
it's like 50 years.
Well, probably longer, because like 50 years, because they're, obviously popping out kids as fast as they can, but essentially that person or whatever is born needs to mature to a point where it can start infecting other people. That person needs to infect another person and then give birth to something else, and that thing needs to grow up. So 4 generations down, at that point, they're ready to move on to either another, like Ryan was saying, another city or another planet. And what better to do that than a pure strain gene stealer? Jesus.
Yeah. And they want to send them out isn't in as many directions. It's that shotgun method. If we make, it's that idea. We get to a point where we have 4 or 5 gene stealer kids, and we're going to shoot those 4 or 5 gene stealer kids out into the galaxy and hope that they infect another planet. And at this point, the reason that I think they make a distinction in lore that this can either become a new patriarch or it can become a gene stealer enslaved to the original patriarch is so you can kind of play around with lore, because they talk about, and we'll get into some examples, but there's cases where a patriarch controls an entire system or an entire like 4 or 5 battle fleets. One patriarch is in control of billions of fucking people because he's spread his influence that way. But you could also just have your little side thing, depending on what you want to do. So say you want to build your lore so they take over a hive city, go nuts. You want to do your lores where they constantly just move to the next planet and keep spreading, which is kind of, I believe, Marky, how you're sort of building your lore, which you'll share with us later. You can do that too, where the entire cult just, the cult leaves people behind to continue, but a core of the cult just moves on to the next project. But yeah, guys, that'll wrap it up for part 1 of our coverage on Genestealer Cults. We will dive into the Patriarch and the Broodmind next episode, looking into how the Patriarch and their Broodmind differ from the Tyrannid Broodlords and the Hive Mind in general. And also Tyrannid broodlords have broodminds too. So we'll get a little bit more into that, because all of the hive mind broodmind stuff is pretty interesting, and we're going to need to kind of dive a little bit more into depth on it. We'll also explore the specialized gene stealer 4th generation roles in more detail and take a look at how the cults move in to undermine their host's society, setting them up to fall like so many dominoes in the chain that leads directly to the Great Devourer's next buffet table.
Buffet.
It's a galactic-sized smorgasbord.
Sometimes you just get a boofed at Buffett.
Wow. So Gene God damn it. Now you don't want to know where my brain went. So Gene Stealers, I think, are a great element of horror work directly into the 40k universe, setting out all sorts of story kernels and foundations to tell some really, really spooky dookies. You want to get deep into it?
Well, I've got, once we get onto, this episode was more of like a rundown of what they are, how they get to where they are. I think once we've established that in one of the episodes, like I said, I watched something that directly, was Genestealer Cult doing these things. And the way that they had their spin on it was actually really cool, because it really emphasized the horror aspect of what they do to the warp.
Yeah.
And why they were doing what they were doing. On this Genestealer Cult was doing with this planet. And it's actually really cool because like once that part was over, I was like, oh, okay, they're Genestealer, blah blah blah. Genestealer Cult do their thing,
Right.
but I had
it's the lead up to figure it
well,
out.
I had no idea that the Shadow and the Warp did this, and then what they were doing with that Shadow and the Warp. It was really cool. I'm excited to talk about it. So we'll save that for next episode.
Just out of curiosity, it wasn't a cold open story, was it? So there's a show. Open. Yeah, so there's a show called Cold Open Stories that's done by a dude named Colin. It's a dramatized audio fiction form of Warhammer 40k, and they have a fucking creepy Genestealer story.
This was
it's not Genestealer, it's Tyrannid story. It's Hormagaunts taking over.
This was the Angel of Death one. It was the Blood Angels video on Warhammer Plus. They showed like a Tyrannid space battle and then them trying to escape. Oh, dude, it was sick. It was sick.
It sounds like it might be worth it to get Plus now. There's enough content.
You need to watch it.
I was holding off on getting it until there was enough content that I wouldn't get rid of it all in a month and then be like, well, I've seen it all. I guess I could cancel my subscription.
Well, I'll just give you my login, but
that works.
Wait, you did not say that on the podcast.
Yeah, right. So it's such a good. I like what they did, and I never even thought about the aspect of their presence in the warp.
That's super cool. So there's a short story in this other podcast, which if you've got time, I would definitely seek it out because the production on these short stories, and they play them out like an audio drama, like an audio book. They get different actors to act out stuff, but basically, some Hormagaunts get left on a planet. Hormagaunts are the bladed guys, right?
Yeah.
Close combat. And they're using their chameleon skin because of their hive fleet trait to blend into areas, and they're using their hive mind powers to blank out parts of the city. So the story is told from an Imperial guardsman who's on rotation at guard sections around the city, and how he just wakes up the next morning. And so it starts out with oh yeah, my patrol goes down 35th, and I round here and I talk to the coffee shop here. I always get my morning coffee and blah blah blah. And then the next day he does his round, the guy that runs the coffee shop isn't there. And then the next day his orders change, and they're okay, you walk down 33rd to 2nd, and then you're going to come up to here. And he's but it's supposed to be 35th. And the administratum officer is there is no 35th. There never has been. The city's not that big. And the story progresses like that through the 20 or 30 minutes, because the Tyrannids are murdering everybody inward to the city. And as they're doing it, the Shadow and the Warp is making anybody who's warp sensitive fucking forget that the city used to be bigger. And it's just the way it's written is it's fucking freaky. And that's the thing, this is we haven't done horror in a bit, and we're back to it. And one of the things we're going to talk about after we get through the series is how to creatively write and how to world build in horror, because it's actually the two things that are very difficult to write are horror and comedy. It's relatively easy to write action. It's relatively easy to write romance, because a lot of us know how we want to be loved, and a lot of us know how we want to see John Wick kill a room full of people. But we don't have a lot of concept of what really freaks us out, and we don't necessarily have a good way of freaking out other people. The exception being Beast. Beast can spin a tale that makes my hair rise, which is fucking amazing. And if you're there, if you're at that level and you got some spooky dookies, especially stuff that deals with Genestealers, get them to us. Get those questions to us. We got a couple different ways that you can interact with us. Email is always good. You can email us directly at underthehiveofmadness@gmail.com or jimdarkgaming@gmail.com. But arguably, the better thing to do is to get involved in our growing Discord community. We love to share in your homebrew lore. It's a very, very good way to grab one of us and get some of those lore questions immediately answered. It's also a way to collaborate with us in writing UHM's own lore, plus everything else our Discord has to offer.
It's probably the most easiest way to get a hold of us because usually we're always on there.
You can also find us online, both through our website. We also have a link tree set up, which will direct you to our Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram accounts. I always put spellings and direct links down in the show notes to make all of the stuff I'm talking about super easy to find. The last thing that we would like to ask you all to do is help us grow the podcast. A couple of different ways to do that as well. The first way, the easiest way, the cheapest way is to go ahead and like us, subscribe to us, give us ratings and reviews, and share us on your podcast platforms of choice. Our home base is Anchor FM and Spotify, but we have also strived to make ourselves available on Apple, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Pocket Casts, and several other things. And if we happen to not be on your favorite podcast platform and you just found us, I dropped 2 emails. Hit me up at one of them. Let me know where you want to be, and I'll make sure that we get moved over there as well. The other way to help us grow is by joining us on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Under the Hive of Madness. You can help our DIY operation continue, make those wheels spin a little bit better, and get us to our next milestone. All Patreon members get access to a video version of this podcast, which is got some cool little video elements. I throw up maps and some images based on what we're talking about, as well as you get to hear some of the crosstalk. In this particular episode, something that definitely got cut out is we had a conversation on what voice I was going to use to read passages earlier. So you want that little extra to see how we sort of interact with each other. That's where it's at.
It's the only way I watch it now. I don't even listen to it any other way now. It's
awesome.
Well, the amount you get too. I mean, like when I'm painting something and stuff, like it's more, it's more connected. It's, I don't know. I just think it's the best way to listen.
Yeah. Speaking of painting, while you're listening to us, if you are part of our Patreon at our lowest tier, which is $3 a month, you have the option to register and enter into our painting contest. We hold a painting contest 4 times a year, and you can win a pretty nifty trophy. We are also always writing, and I say I because I'm the one who does the primary art, but we are always writing stuff, and I am always working on some artwork so we can get you guys out some extra resources at the higher Patreon levels, including if you're interested in some Under the Hive of Madness or Grimdark Gaming objective markers, you can get the high resolution artwork from us through Patreon and take it to your favorite printer. Hell, you could even print it massively and put it on your wall. I don't care what you do with it. I made the art and gave it to you if you follow us on Patreon. The bones are piling up between Lavinia and Mastodon as they eat as many of these spicy scorpion hot wings as they can. I don't know. I think the belt might actually go to the much smaller Lavinia. Something about that drummer. She just... Not only is she the best drummer in the Hive, she might be the best at eating drumsticks in the Hive. What do you guys think? Do you think this is going to go her way, or do you think Mastodon's going to pull ahead?
I don't know. This ain't much compared to Damacaron wings.
I don't know where she's putting it.
I do.
It's always the smallest ones.
I know where I'm going to put it.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, me too.
You guys keep saying that. They're not going to invite us back to host these events. When you are looking for
who else are they going to get? I don't think anybody else down here knows how to broadcast.
Fucking me too, my man.
When you're on the hunt for the spiciest barbecue Damacaron wings, come on down to Bob's Barbecue Basket on sublevel 351. As always, we have been the boys at 665.66 UHMR Chemrat Radio, bidding you a fantastic 5th shift. I think it's 5th shift anyway. I feel like 4th is over.
It's all F shifts to me.
Catch us next time. Same Vox wavelength, same ratty attitude. It's almost as if we each have a 4-armed emperor inside of us. Controlling that beast, that dark side, is what's always fascinated me.
I just have one very large armed emperor.
Yeah. All I know is that if Beast starts trying to sleep with me, I know something's up.
Dirty motherfuckers.
Penetration.